I'm afraid so. Another video on stretching watercolor paper, but with a twist. Welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor, everybody. You know, there is a lot of information out there on stretching watercolor paper, how to do it, why should I do it. Reese and I were going over some questions here, and I think the way I'm going to approach it is a frequently asked questions video. Just about every watercolor book ever written has got a page on it or a chapter on it. There are videos out there, and there's a lot of information, and a lot of it doesn't necessarily agree with each other. What I want to do today is kind of cut through all that, give you the benefit of my experience, find out what the main questions are, which bits of information work or seem to work, and which ones don't. And it's also going to be a chance in the comments when I'm done for you to input your experience. So we're going to cover this from stem to stern, from beginner to advanced, and we're even going to end up with how to avoid stretching altogether, and that's my favorite subject because I don't stretch watercolor paper unless I absolutely have to. So Reese, buddy, what do you say we get started? Okay, first of all, for you beginners, what is paper stretching for watercolor and why should I do it? Now, this is 140-pound Arch watercolor paper. You're painting on something like this. The more water you use in the wash, the more it soaks into the paper and it expands, and you start getting buckling, peaks and valleys. And it's real annoying because your water will settle into those valleys. Stretching is designed to eliminate that buckling. What you do is you soak the paper until all the paper expands. While it's still wet, you fasten it to a surface. You capture it at the expanded size, and as it dries, it stretches the paper. The paper will not return to its original size. Then when it's bone dry and you go to paint on it, it'll be flat. So question number 2, how long do I soak my paper? You get anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes to, I've heard, a half an hour to an hour. You want to make sure this paper has completely absorbed all the water it will, and it's expanded to its fullest extent. You say, okay, great. Well, how long is that? About 5 to 10 minutes is usually good. The next question that's usually asked is, can I soak my paper too long? The answer is yes. Otherwise, you could just put it in and soak it for hours and just be sure. But because they put a sizing in the paper, a sizing is just to keep your watercolor from soaking into the paper like a blotter. It just allows the pigment to perform better on the surface. You don't want to wash that sizing out. So it's a matter of soaking it as long as you can without taking the sizing out. For arch paper, I found I can go 15 minutes and it doesn't affect the sizing at all. Usually 10 minutes though is enough. You may use a different brand, in which case I would test it. The test you can use is when you hold it up, if it bends over and acts like cloth, totally soaked. See if it bends over, if it snaps back, it's not fully soaked yet. If it bends over and stays and starts acting sort of like cloth, it's soaked. Generally, I think for most brands, it's going to be around 10 minutes. A lot of videos, a lot of the instructions out there recommend 2 to 3 minutes. I tend to think that's not quite enough. You can understretch paper, and it happens all the time. So the next question is, once I've soaked my paper, how do I fasten it down to let it dry and stretch? The standard way has always been to apply moistened gummed paper tape to every edge. Now I'm going to tell you why I don't think that's a good way to do it anymore. Now I'll put a link down in the description to a video showing the most common method of stretching watercolor paper with paper tape, with the disclaimer that I don't think that that's sufficient. I think you have to add staples. There are tons and tons of artists out there, trust me, including master watercolorists, that are now saying that method works about half the time. Paper pulls away from the tape. at some spot. I don't know if any of you are familiar with master watercolor painter Anita Engel. She tapes then staples her work, and this is going to be my recommendation. If you're going to use a standard fastening system and a non-commercial stretcher, and we're going to get to commercial stretchers in a minute, so hold on, I would recommend staples, and you need to space them close together. Tape just will not hold it 100% guaranteed every time. Now another way, a very good way, is to put it on a canvas stretcher. Now I'm going to include a link down below in the description of a video where they do that. Very, very good way to do it. This particular artist gets watercolor paper that she claims is stretched tight as a drum, and I think it's a great way to go. But if you're going to mount watercolor paper to a board surface, I strongly recommend you just don't mess with the tape, or if you do use the tape, go back on top of it with staples. Now the next question is there any other way to do it besides taping or stapling? Yes, there are a number of commercial stretchers out there on the market. Now the drawback to the commercial stretchers are they're a fixed size. I like this one a lot. This is called the Ken Bromley. You wet your paper, you place it down, you sponge off the excess, but now you wrap the edge around and it's got this retainer that gets mashed in to this groove. Now the advantage of a stretcher like this is that it adds tension to the paper in addition to the contraction that it gets when it dries. So this is a very good option. The drawback is it's expensive and you're limited to that one size. And he has a bigger size. If you want to do the bigger size, you'll have to buy two of them or buy the bigger size and cut it down once you've stretched a larger sheet. The advantage to taping or stapling is that you can do a custom size sheet. You can make that whatever size you want. Now I will put a link to the Ken Bromley stretcher, and he also has a video showing how he uses this, and you can get an idea if that's the direction you want to go. Now this is another option. I really like this option. I actually have two of these. I have this one and I have the larger one. This is the Otto Stretcher. Again, you do it in the same way. You soak your paper, place it down, remove the excess moisture, but then it uses these clamping bars that go on the edge and they get tightened down. And it eliminates the need for tape or staples. Again, same drawback as the Ken Bromley. You're limited to this size or the larger size. He actually has 4 sizes. He's got a mini through a full sheet size. So you can get the bigger size, stretch it, and then do 2 paintings on it, or 3 paintings, or however many you can get out of a sheet if you want to. If I stretch, this is the one that I use. The Ken Bromley is new and I'm going to be trying it too, but I like the Otto Stretcher. I will put a link down there as well. You can see the Otto Stretcher, and he has a really good video on how you use his product. Now another question I'm asked quite frequently is, Steve, what about watercolor blocks? Isn't that the best answer of all? No stretching, all your paper is provided in a block on a pad, and all of art supply site says that this is pre-stretched paper and you don't have to worry about it.
Lies, all lies.
Yeah. Watercolor blocks are not pre-stretched paper. They might be stretched a little bit, but trust me, you put a lot of wet washes on a watercolor block and it will buckle just like an unfastened sheet. And finally, the last question is, what if I really just don't want to stretch watercolor paper? You're speaking my language now if you feel that way. And most of the time, I do avoid it with either a commercial stretcher or this. First way, 300-pound paper. Don't have to stretch it. A lot of water on 300-pound paper might cause it to bow a little bit or warp, but you don't get the same kind of hills and valleys that you do with 140-pound paper. 300 pounds a little more expensive, but hey. The other one is Arch makes a really nice watercolor board. No buckling. I love it. just pull out a piece of board and start painting. Again, it will warp a little bit, but we're talking about the whole board. Anyway, guys, I hope that answers some questions. I know I didn't do a stretching demo, but only because there are just tons of them out there, and I avoid it when possible. But these are some of the questions that come along very often, and let's discuss this in the comments if you want to. If you have a way that you think is foolproof, go ahead and put that down there and we'll talk about it some more. I hope I've cut through some of the confusion for you, and if this was a help to you, I hope you'll like, I hope you'll subscribe. I even have a way now on my channel page that you can support me monetarily if you wish. My content will always be free. I appreciate your support, whether you're watching or contributing. Anyway, guys, see you next time. Thank you.